We are now going to examine the features of color Doppler settings. Although we will use color Doppler as our example, the same principles apply to power Doppler settings as well. When the user adjusts the color Doppler settings, there are two structures, the fetal heart and the umbilical cord, that can be used for a reference when optimizing the color Doppler settings. Note that the umbilical vein is the size of 50% of the right ventricle and the umbilical artery is the size of the foraminal valley. Depending upon the position, the examiner may select either of these structures to use for adjusting the color Doppler image. This slide represents the main screen and submenu of one of the ultrasound machines used in my practice. While some of the terminology may vary between manufacturers, the concepts are the same. Let's examine each of these features and see examples of their effect on the color Doppler image. We will first examine the features that are often found on the main console. Many of the features can be adjusted or activated while the image is being acquired. Let's first examine the gain control. If the gain control is set too low, then no color will be displayed on the screen. If it is set too high, then random speckle appears. Let's view examples of this concept. In this image, the gain control is set appropriately. In this image, the gain control is set too low. Notice the absence of the color Doppler signal. The gain control in this image is set too high. Notice the random speckle that appears on the image. What does the quality setting do? This setting affects the color resolution and the frame rate. If the setting is high, the color Doppler resolution is improved while lowering the frame rate. If the quality setting is normal, then there is normal resolution with a medium frame rate. If the quality setting is low, there is a lower resolution but a higher frame rate. In this image, the quality setting is low with a frame rate of 41. Notice how the color bleeds over the grayscale image. In this example, the color does not discriminate between the two umbilical arteries. This image illustrates the high setting. Notice how the colors within the borders of the vessels and the two umbilical arteries are delineated from each other. However, the frame rate has decreased to 31 frames per second. Now let's examine the wall motion filter. The wall motion filter has a number of settings ranging from low 1 to max. When the filter is set to low, notice the color Doppler bleeds outside the walls of the vessels. When the wall motion filter is set to high, notice that the color remains within the vessels. When the examiner increases or decreases the PRF, it is equivalent to increasing or decreasing the velocity range. The PRF or velocity range setting can be adjusted to optimize the color Doppler image. In this example, the PRF is set too low, thus resulting in aliasing. In this example, the PRF has been adjusted, demonstrating an ideal color Doppler image. The invert function simply inverts the color display for direction of blood flow. This is useful when inverting the B mode image on the screen and desiring to display the color flow in the direction the blood is actually flowing on the B mode image. This is the 2D and 2D color function. This setting displays the B mode image without color Doppler on the left, and the color Doppler superimposed on the B mode image on the right. This is a useful display that I used in almost all cases. This is the threshold adjustment. The threshold eliminates small color noise or motion artifact signals in the color image. It can only be adjusted in the freeze mode. In this image, the threshold is set at 10, resulting in color overlying the ventricular walls and septa. Using a higher threshold setting, the interface between the color Doppler and the walls is better delineated. This is the submenu page. Each manufacturer may have different options in their submenu selections. However, the features are very similar. Let's now explore what these features are and how they may affect the image. Display selection allows the examiner to choose various settings, depending upon how the examiner desires the color Doppler to be displayed. This is a display of the color maps that are available: velocity, velocity and turbulence, velocity and power, power and turbulence, and turbulence. Let's now examine the color map setting. This expands upon the various iterations of the previous color maps to provide the user with more choices. This represents the variations of the 5 main display maps described previously. The transmit frequency has 3 settings, high, low, and mid, that allows the user to select different velocity settings for a given PRF. When high is selected, lower velocities are displayed and the penetration depth is reduced. When low is selected, higher velocities are displayed and the penetration depth is increased. The mid selection is between the high and the low. Flow resolution adjusts the axial resolution. This is an important setting because it may improve the differentiation between myocardium and the blood pool. The low flow resolution setting demonstrates larger pixels in the color map. This is noticeable at the edges of the color map as blood enters the ventricular chambers. The high flow resolution setting creates smaller pixels of color. Let's toggle between the two views so you can see the difference. This is the scale setting menu. This simply allows the examiner to display velocity as either kilohertz, centimeters per second, or meters per second. I prefer centimeters per second. This is the balance feature and is important to understand. This function has also been called the right priority by other manufacturers. In essence, it controls the amount of color displayed over B-mode echoes. Adjusting this setting allows the examiner to balance the display between color Doppler and B-mode echoes. An example of this adjustment will illustrate how this works. In this image, the balance is set at 225. When examining this clip, it is evident that the color pixels are overriding the walls displayed on the B-mode image. Therefore, it is impossible to identify the interface between the blood pool and the walls of the heart. Changing the balance to 25, the color Doppler is now confined to the blood pool and does not extend over the walls. Let's now examine the smoothing feature. This performs temporal averaging, which improves the appearance of the color Doppler image. There are 2 adjustments. By adjusting the rise to a low value, this prevents blurring of the color Doppler image with movement. Adjusting the fall either prolongs or shortens the displayed flow. Let's review some examples of this function. In this example, the rise and fall are set at 1. Notice the frame rate is 29 Hz. In this example, the rise is increased to 5 and the fall to 12. Even though the frame rate is 29 Hz, the color seems to persist on the screen longer. It does not appear to be in synchrony with the B-mode image. In this example, the rise is 12 and the fall is 12. Notice that by increasing the rise, the color has almost disappeared from the screen. It's important to see how adjusting these settings affects the image. The ensemble setting controls the number of pulses for one displayed color Doppler line. If one increases the ensemble, the frame rate decreases but the color detail improves. If the ensemble is decreased, the frame rate increases but the detail of the color image decreases. Let's see examples of the effects on the color display when we adjust these settings. In this example, the ensemble is set to 8 and has a corresponding frame rate of 39 Hz. The ensemble has now been increased to 33 with a frame rate decreasing to 15 Hz. Let's now toggle between these 2 settings and see the difference. The line density function determines the density of lines in the color box. For example, the lower the setting, the greater the distance between the lines and size of the color pixels. Let's review the effect of changing this setting on the image. This image illustrates a line density of 1. Notice that the frame rate is 28. The definition of the color Doppler image is blurry. lacking detail and covers the interadrial septum. This would be considered artifact. In this example, the line density has been increased to 6. The frame rate has dropped to 14. However, the color Doppler contains more color pixels, resulting in better discrimination between the blood pool and the walls and septa of the heart. The line density has now been increased to 10. The frame rate is now further decreased to 7. The color pixels are smaller, with even more detail than the previous setting. The user selects a setting for the line density. The selection should provide the highest line density with an acceptable frame rate. The next option is artifact suppression. This setting reduces movement artifact. For an evaluation of the cardiovascular system, this should be set to off. Next is the baseline setting. This changes the baseline and prevents aliasing in one direction. This is a clip that illustrates different colors displayed when the baseline is set in the middle. In this example, the baseline has been adjusted upwards, resulting in primarily a blue display. This is an example of adjusting the baseline upwards. This illustrates setting the baseline at the bottom, resulting in a red color Doppler image display. This illustrates the color Doppler image when the baseline is at the bottom. Let's now examine the line filter setting. The line filter determines the amount of lateral filtering that occurs, which is the balance between lateral resolution and image noise. In this example, the line filter is off. Notice how the color is displayed beyond the borders of the vessels. In this image, the line filter is 7. The color Doppler is now confined more within the vessels. This sequence illustrates the changes in the image when the line filter is adjusted from off to 7. Notice that as the line density is increased, the color stays within the boundaries of the vessel walls.